Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Planet Lizzdom. I can't believe we're already at episode 45. Can you believe that? It is a beautiful and very chilly winter night, and I'm so happy to be with you guys again this week. As luck would have it, Wi-Fi and the internet and everything in between have been more than mercurial today, but you know what? We got through it. We figured it out, and I'm so excited to do this show with you. You know, I met this wonderful artist when he came over to our place to photograph my boyfriend Mysterion back in October for the Toronto Star. And you know, I have to tell you, I was immediately impressed with his ability to connect with us and with our space. And I have to tell you, through such easy and meaningful conversation, I began to learn about his documentary photography. And, you know, I have to say it was pure kismet to make his acquaintance because as I spoke with him, I began to learn about his important and meaningful work, and it's more specifically his book, Forever on the Fringe, which I am so honored to investigate and learn about with you this evening. Everybody, I want you to give a very warm and very rambunctious welcome to the wonderful, amazing Giovanni Capriotti. Hi, Giovanni. How are you?
Very good. What about you?
Great. Thank you for being with us tonight. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for inviting me. I'm glad that we can talk. I didn't know I could swear. I read the titles before and I was surprised. Well, I can do that. That's fine. I'm Italian, you know.
Absolutely. Well, you know, I do have a fairly young audience that watches as well, but you know, we like to be about PG-13 if we can. So, you know, if an F-bomb drops here and there, it's not the end of the world.
Anyway, just a little thing. You mentioned my book,
Yes.
The title is the "Oh Either." It's forever on the fringe. It's part of that, but it's something
Oh,
that inspired the book. But that's okay. Don't worry. I mean, it's
oh,
connected, and it's always important. You know.
absolutely. Well, you know what? Thank you for correcting me on that. I try to do my research as best as I can, but sometimes we get it wrong, and that is absolutely okay as long as you're willing to take accountability for it.
Yeah, yeah, no worries, no worries. I mean, that's fine. I mean, it's good that you mentioned even the other one because that's what basically led me to that and make me investigate the topic that we'll talk about. So,
Absolutely. Well, there are a couple of things that I do want to go over before we get to that, and I really want to make sure we have a lot of time to talk about that. But for those of us who may not know much about you, you are a photographer, you're an artist, and you're originally from Italy.
yeah.
What brought you into photography, and what brought you to Canada?
Okay. So photography, it's a long story. It happened a long time ago. I had my grandmother, she died 100 years old in 2013. She used to work in a pension, one of those hotels, let's put it this way, right in the center of Rome. And she found a camera that somebody had left in a room and never claimed back. It was a Yashica, was one of those old school camera, and I was a little guy, so she brought it back home, and I got immediately fascinated by the camera and even the object. It was one of those camera with a viewfinder that was on top, so you had to look from upon,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, so you had the two lenses in front. It was one of those, you know. I think you would collect that. You would put it in your house, something like that, right? Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. So that's that in a way opened up a world for me because I didn't know anything about photography, and eventually I realized that it was too expensive for me at the time to buy film because again I was a little guy. I must have been the age of my daughter, 9, 10, something like that, right? But there's something that was always sitting with me, and then eventually in Italy, we all born and raised Catholic, right? So I remember I did the first communion and I got a Polaroid as a present. So that was my step up, right? It
Oh,
was
yeah.
still expensive, but I had, relatives that were buying me the cartridges and, the film and this kind of thing. So that was the beginning. Then, I became a teenager. I went towards other directions. I was into music. I was DJing. I was going to parties. Was collecting records and all these kind of things. And I was living in London when I was 19. I had kind of dropped out of the university that my parents wanted me to do, which
Hmm.
was business, right? But
Okay.
I didn't want to do that, so I ended up in London, and I didn't have a job, right? So I was going to these job centers, and I'm honest, I was getting social security that is called income support. So I had the UB40 card. By the way, the name of the band is coming from that card.
Oh my
The
God. I was 8 years old when I learned that. Okay.
Okay, so I had that, and I kept going seeing, these social worker, let's call it that way, and she was like, you know what, you're too young, you can't come here every 2 weeks and put your signature. You get these 74 pounds, then you go out with your friends, you burn them. You got to do something, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, so, well, I mean, I was very young, so I didn't know what to say. My English wasn't that good, and it was really hard to understand some of the people. mm, some of the people from East London or that area that were into that type of weird slang that goes by the name of Cockney, right?
Yeah.
And you can find them even working in public offices, right? So I was like, okay, what should I do? And she gave me a book, and there were a bunch of courses, right, and
Hmm.
degrees and college, a bunch of things. So I remember one night I went to a place where all the buskers, because those were the 90s, right? All the buskers in London were meeting up.
Yeah.
And I met this friend of mine that was in that group of people, right? And he looked at the book and was like, "Oh, you been to get your money today, right?" And they told you got to do something. And I was like, "Oh, I mean, now I'm making it simple. At the time, my English wasn't that good, and it was
Okay.
like, you know what? But you should look in that book. I'm doing TV, like you studying TV and broadcasting, these kind of things. Pick for something that you like, and you can keep getting the money, and they'll pay that for you. They'll pay the
Mhm.
course.
Oh,
So
wow.
I opened up the book, and I picked this course in photography. So I went back, and the caseworker, whatever you want to call it, she
Mhm.
directed me back to this university, and she told me that since I was part of the European Union, I was entitled to get up to £30,000 to study, and then eventually I would have been supposed to pay them back when I was making £30,000. So it's not like the student loan that you get. That's how I started, right? So I went to London College of Communication. I did film photography, and yeah, I mean that was the very beginning. It was the dark room. It was film photography. It was. I mean, I was in the club scene, so my very first project was about that. It was about drum and bass and house music, the things that I loved, and the DJs and these kind of things. And then eventually, I had to do the national service, right? Because at the time there was the mandatory national service in Italy, so I had to be back. I finished, went back, and after the national service, I traveled a little bit through Europe, and basically. What I was doing at the time, I was smoking pot and taking pictures of girls. That's what I was
Okay.
doing.
As one does.
Yeah, I mean, I was super young, and then my mom called me back at a certain point, and she said, "Oh, do you want to work in an Ireland? I know a way that you could be called up, and you can go for an interview and blah blah blah." So eventually, I got that job, right? And I kept the job pretty much always. I mean, I was always in love with photography and other stuff, but I didn't have the clients that I have now. I wasn't shooting for the newspapers or the magazines as I do now, but I was traveling a lot because I have those industrial discounts. So eventually, I got the job, so I was able to get these industrial discounts, and that's how I honed. How I started honing my technique in creating relationship with people and telling stories and stuff like that. And it was up until 2008. In 2008, the airline went into bankruptcy, and I was laid off. And at that time, I decided that I wanted to be a photographer. So I had a few contacts, and I took 3 or 4 jobs, assignments that I had in Southeast Asia. And
Okay.
I left, one of which was in Cambodia, and I had to tell the story of this huge garbage dump that has a slum around, and people basically make a living picking from the garbage and recycling. So that was my very first big story. A lot of mistakes made, a lot of things that I wouldn't do the same now,
Yeah.
but that's part of the game. And while I was on that trip, when I finished all the jobs that I have for that agency, um, I kept traveling looking for more stories, and that's when I met my wife in Tibet,
Oh,
my
wow.
Canadian wife. Yeah, that's when I met her, and we kept traveling together. And then eventually, I decided to come back to Canada with her, but to cut it short. Then when I
Wow.
came to Canada, I didn't know anybody, and I had to, uh, build up a name for myself. And I thought of going back to school, so I went to Loyalist College for photojournalism in Belleville,
Okay.
and that's how I got in touch with all the people from the industry. And then I was lucky enough that after 2 years, I won probably, not probably, I mean, the Oscar of photography, which is called the World Press Photo, with the story of the LGBTQ rugby team from Toronto, which I followed for 2 years. And
I'm just showing a photo right now. I think this is part of it, if I am correct.
yeah, that's the very first opening of the series. I followed these guys for 2 years, And then, again, I was out of school. I won the WordPress photo in 2017. I finished school in 2015. But as soon as I was out of school, I was asked to move to Montreal and work for the Gazette as a stringer. So
Wow.
I lived 2 years in Montreal working for the Toronto Star, Montreal Gazette, Canadian Press, the Globe and Mail, and a bunch of the United Nations and several other publication from Europe, right? And even from Italy, because I can make the most of two languages. I speak English and Italian, so I can work even in Italian if I have to. And that's how everything started. And then, I kept doing things. I'm always moving around. I'm always,
I'm just showing some articles here where your
yeah,
work is
yeah, yeah.
shown. For those of us who don't know, what exactly is a stringer? You
Oh,
know.
a stringer is somebody that gets called up almost on a daily basis from a publication, right? So
Oh,
it's
okay.
somebody that has got a relationship for a publication. It's not a staffer, but it gets a call almost every day or 3, 4 times a week. So you're pretty much working for the publication as a freelance. That's basically what I'm doing for the Toronto Star now, right? So that's they have
Hmm.
2 or 3 stringers, so people that work for them almost on a daily basis, and
Wow.
you get jobs. Today I've been out all day. I mean, this is actually my first moment of relax because I had to go
Oh,
get my COVID test since I'm going to Italy on Saturday.
wow.
Yeah,
Oh
I
my
gotta go back.
gosh.
I haven't been to Italy in almost 4 years, so I'm gonna go see my parents and do some bureaucracy that I have to take care of. Going to the banks and getting some cards. I got 2 banks and I leave. Uh, I'm from Rome. To
Oh,
the
you're from home.
person,
Okay.
yeah, to the person that is asking, I am from Rome. I was born and raised in Rome. Then I moved to London, and no, first to Amsterdam, sorry, then from Amsterdam to London, and then eventually lived back and forth between Rome and London for a while, and then I moved to Canada.
Wow. Now, as that is wonderful. I mean, I love that you've had so much travel already. As a stringer, while you're over in Italy, will you still be on call to do local stories there for these publications in Canada?
I mean, I got my stuff with me. Normally, it's not happening. I could get other stuff from Italian publications or other contacts that I have there, but I will have to do some more work, because I'm teaching photojournalism next semester at University of Guelph Amber. I just got the job, just got the offer, so I've already designed the course, but I will have to look for the readings and the movies and these kind of things that I gotta make available to the students. So I will have to do that, and then I will have to work on uh, the paper about my book, because first you make a photo book and then you got to write a paper, especially if you're doing an MFA like I am. That's the academic part. And
Yeah.
then I got other photo stuff that I'm doing. The idea was that up until 3 days ago there would have been a group of elders that would
Okay.
have traveled to Rome to meet with the Pope in the grand scheme of truth and reconciliation for the apology and the residential school.
Mhm.
So my idea was to pitch it to the Star, since I was there, and basically I can walk from my parents' house to St. Peter.
Oh,
I can literally walk. It's a 5 minute walk. So my idea was to pitch that. My wife suggested that to me, but eventually they
mhm.
canceled the trip because of the Omicron variant. They're
Right.
elders, right? So some of them can be in their 80s or 85. So they're not doing it now. They'll postpone the travel, the trip, when it'll be better in terms of immunization and even infections and stuff like that. And it makes sense. So that was an idea. But I'm open to everything. I'm bringing only one camera. Normally I go around with 2 cameras, but
Hmm.
this time I'm gonna have one that I always have with me, because I'm always taking pictures and making pictures, especially when I'm in Italy, because I got so many of these things that I'm collecting every time that I go, that I'd like at some point to put together a book. So
I'm just showing some of your amazing photography, and I have to say, I love that you will incorporate some very natural occurring elements like this water on the lens. You
Yeah, this
know,
is Manitoulin Island. This is Alaska. This is Alaska. You
oh, yeah.
taking those? You didn't take the ones from my website, right?
No, these actually, those ones I found on Facebook. Um,
Okay. Yeah,
see if
yeah.
I can look.
Those are the little ones that I snap. Just uh, I mean, with my phone most of the times. Yeah,
Well,
the other one of the majority of my work is on my website, and that's the official work. These other ones, I'm using phones. I'm using all sorts of camera to shoot, right?
well,
But I like those two that you show.
well, it is so funny, and as an artist, we sometimes will undervalue what we've created, but for me as the viewer, I'm thoroughly impressed that that is from your phone. That these are
Yeah.
the composition and the light and the quality for me is just wonderful, but I can see how, celluloid versus digital versus handheld camera versus single lens reflex, I absolutely get the differences and the nuances, but the visual impact upon seeing them for the first time is lovely, you know.
Okay, thank you. No,
You're welcome.
the idea is that I use everything to shoot. I'm not a camera. I'm not a gearhead.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm using whatever I have available. I mean, I shoot a lot of video. By the way, I shoot a lot of stuff that I use for my book trailers or stuff. I shoot it with my phone. Now, we're at a point in which they shoot 4K. You can do everything with them. So I mean, but I'm not keen on technology. To me, it's just the purpose, the story, the project, what you have, the ideas.
Well, I always loved this story that I heard about Karsh, where with a lot of his early photographs, he didn't have very sophisticated technology, but the quality was there. It's not so much the paintbrush, it's the hand using it.
Yeah.
And there is that theory that you can work with as high quality or as low quality tech as you want, but it's really how you use it and understand the nuance of it that makes the biggest difference. At least that's been my experience.
No, no, it is that way. I mean, I'm a big supporter of this statement. I mean, you gotta have ideas. You gotta have visual literacy ideas, and think about alternatives, to what it's already being done. I mean, everything is already being done. You
Hmm.
can redo it in a different way, right? There's this um, she's a professor at University of Edmonton or Calgary. I don't remember. Her name is Catherine Lovelace. She says that you got to tell a story more than once in order to be able every time to unveil new details, right? So I mean, I think that almost all the stories have already been told, but it's always about repeating them that is bringing forth new elements and new ideas, right?
So I am curious, is that what brought you to documentary photography?
No, I mean, the documentary photography it grew in me kind of in an organic way through the travels and the things that I was doing, and that's pretty much how I got there. I wanted to document my relationship with people, and how this relationship is evolving with me, growing even older than what I am now. And I have to say that compared to 2009, 2008, when I started, a lot of things changed. I mean, as I mentioned, one of my first project was full on poverty. I wouldn't do it the same way that I did it. I mean, if you look at those pictures, aesthetically they can be even amazing in a way. I still consider them very good from an aesthetic point of view, but I wouldn't do it the way that I did it at that time. I wouldn't parachute me there and then leave, because basically I spent, even if I spent a month with the people from the dump,
Hmm.
I mean, I wouldn't do it that way again, because it's such a huge issue that if you want to get all the layers a month, you're basically going there, taking something and leaving. And now I'm not playing the academic, because I'm listening to these ideas every day and what
Hmm.
I do. And, I get highly criticized by the academic world. I mean, photojournalists in general, they get criticized for being the ones that are commodifying, images and selling them and doing these kind of things. However, there is truth in that, and that's what is making me think that I would have done things differently now in the same situations of 12, 13 years ago, 15 years ago, right? So that's documentary photography. It's this process of understanding and creating representations that are shared with people, right?
Right. Well, and that's something that I have always been very intrigued with documentary for, because it really is through your lens that I'm seeing the truth, or being presented the reality, and what you see through the lens may be very different from what I see through the lens, but the endeavor to be as objective as possible can sometimes be a little difficult, because in the end it is somewhat subjective, no matter what.
Well, you just said it. That objectivity doesn't exist in photography. You
Yeah.
point the camera and you decide what's in the frame, right? Furthermore, you sequence images, you establish your own language. So that's why photography is such a huge thing, from a visual literacy point of view. That to me, this is something that I'm telling everybody. Photography cannot be considered just something that we have fun with, and we got a bunch of pros that work for the newspapers or for these kind. Photography, it's part of society. Therefore, children as young as my daughter should be introduced to elements of visual literacy that is cultural, like, because the visual literacy that you have here is different from the one that they have in Italy, or they have in Spain, or they have in England, right? So you understanding how things are seen and perceived at different latitudes is really important. So it would be great to teach it to kids, young, especially the young ones, because it can be a cultural thing, especially in a place like Canada that has got so many different people, so many ethnicity. So it could be even a little bit broader in Canada, right? You got the indigenous
Yeah.
people, you got the multiculturalism on the other side. So teaching element of visual literacy, it's important for the role of photography within society and the archives, right?
Absolutely. I do want to talk a little more about visual literacy before we get on to our next subject after these messages. Just give me 1 second here.
Hey everyone! Planet Lizzdom now has a Patreon. Your help will allow Liz to make the show even bigger, cover costs, and help bring on celebrity guests. Go to patreon.com/Planet Lizzdom and pledge now.
Now, I do love this idea of visual literacy because, the youngest generation that we have available, or that has access to the internet right now, can be children as young as 1 or 2 years old. Boom, they're put an iPad is put in their lap, and they're all of a sudden looking at photos. They're going online. Sometimes it's unsupervised, and I love this notion that visual literacy should be taught, because the truth is we've never had greater access to visual content, either watching it or creating it. As a parent, how do you approach visual literacy and um, internet literacy?
I mean, I'm not at a point yet because my daughter, she doesn't go on internet. She has a computer. She uses the computer for school. She has messenger kids. She talks to other little girls, so they do little character, Japanese characters. That's what they're doing.
Okay.
So I'm not at that stage yet, but it is important because we got this daily flood of images that is coming at us, right? And in the newspaper, you got an editor that is making calls, and is making these calls according to the story, according to what the newspaper, the newspaper politics are, but even according to policing, frames, because nowadays you got to pay attention. I can tell you a little story because this is something that I think is super important. I got this friend of mine, another photographer. He was doing work in Flint, right?
Mhm.
So he was shooting the Flint Jaguars. He's a WordPress photo winner as well. So
Okay.
he won the WordPress photo last year. So he shot this basketball team, the Flint Jaguars. And while he was there, he was shooting, shot these pictures of these basketball player, a person of color that was drinking from a little fountain, the ones that you have in a high school, right?
Oh
But
yes.
he shot it through the little square of a door, right? So you got the wooden door, you got a little square with a glass, and shot
Yeah.
it. He wanted to do something creative, so he did that, right? Shot it through the. Then he was showing these pictures to somebody, and somebody was like, "You know what? You got a black person on the other side,
Mhm.
and you got this little square. This picture can be perceived as if that person is incarcerated. So, according to their culture, the culture in the United States, that stereotype, it's going on and on and on and on. So that's how you form some kind of visual literacy. So you want to pay attention to these little things, but this is not censorship.
Yeah.
It's about understanding, how things get created. So even when you tell a story, you want to, talk about what is important and not perpetrate stereotypes, which sadly happened within photojournalism or documentary photography. A lot of stereotypes about poverty, about
Mhm.
racism, about these kind of things have been repeated, sold, and fed to the audience. And when you do that, you create one way of seeing, right?
Yeah.
Whereas you gotta be able to create different alternatives and show the things 360 degrees, even if, as you say, it's always you pointing the camera. So it's really important to understand these things before you start doing this job and you start dealing with people, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's unfortunately the subconscious predilection to adopt preconceived notions culturally, personally, it is always going to be attached with that. And I know you have an amazing and very important book that's coming out, and I think this is a very good lead into that because there's so much responsibility attached to what you have created, and I want to make sure that we can talk about this. I think what I should probably do is play the trailer first for a bit of context.
Yeah.
So, it is about 3.5 minutes long, folks. It is absolutely important that you watch this because it is so
It's a little,
powerful.
it's a little bit more than that. It's 4 minutes. What
Is it
do you
four
think?
minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you can play as much as you want. I mean, you can stop it whenever you want. I mean,
I think I'd like to play the whole thing because it really
okay.
does give some very, very important context to what we're going to talk about next. Here it is.
I was taken away. I was about 6 years old. The only language I knew is my original native tongue. We were told not to use that language again. You have to use our language. You have to use our language. Lizzdom, it means sacred island. This island was inhabited only by Nishnabek people.
I come from Manitoulin Island. It's the largest freshwater island in the world. I was confused as Canada is not a third world country, but here in my country, the Indigenous people live in third world conditions.
And though residential schools are thankfully a thing of the past, that is the legacy of colonialism in Canada.
13 years of my life, I've struggled hard to gain where I am today as an Anishinaabe person. Say that I'm a survivor itself from the foster care era. I was taken away at an early age. I endured a lot of physical, emotional, and spiritual abuse.
Why doesn't the Prime Minister just say the truth and tell the Indigenous peoples that he doesn't give a fuck?
The things has changed since 600 years ago when the Europeans came around and started living on the island also.
He doesn't give a fuck.
Wow, I've watched this trailer a few times, and there are so many things that I keep noticing time after time after again. What brought you to Manitoulin Island? What inspired this?
So this is a scrapbook, a visual scrapbook of what I've been doing there for the past 7 years, right? And it's something that I shot with phones, cameras, old pictures, all sorts of things. It's a collage, that is showing how that place is so multi-layered. Okay, so it's a little bit I call it my digital bibliography, right? It's all these voices, all these egos that are coming out, characters, mainstream, non-mainstream. You got the elders, you got all these things, and it's something that is, it's on my website. I'll use it for my book as a book trailer. I will do a new one. I will implement this one because I kept shooting a lot this past summer. I was almost 2 months on the island working there. But what brought me to Manitoulin Island is it happened in 2010 when I was new to Canada, and I was traveling up north with a friend of mine from Rome, and we had this paper map, and we just took a diversion on the Trans-Canada Highway. And we started because we saw that there was this huge island on the paper map, and was like, let's go see. So halfway between the place that is called Espanola and the bridge that is leading to the island, we noticed that we were running out of gas, and there was a gas station with a very cheap gas price. So I went there, filled up my tank, went inside. The lady that was in there, I didn't know anything. She told me the price, right? And I'm not this mathematic genius, but I was like, whoa, it's a little bit over to what is advertised outside as per liter, right? So I was like, how come? And she looked at me and she was like, are you indigenous? And I was like, I didn't even know what it was, right? I was like, what's that? And she laughed and she was like, so where are you from? And I'm like, oh, I'm Italian. I come from the land of the guy that discovered all this. I wanted to make a joke, right?
Yeah.
I was referring to Christopher Columbus, right?
Yeah.
She laughed. She bursted into a laugh, and then she told me, "Look, this is the way that it works in Canada. It's for Indigenous people, and blah blah blah." But she didn't explain me all the colonial nomenclature. Came back home, told my wife. She blushed and she was like, "Did you really say that?" I was like, "Come on, I don't know anything about that. The only thing that I know, it's what I got as a child, which is cowboys and Indian, right?"
Yes.
So that was my very first encounter with the indigenous culture in general, and I felt that something wasn't right. I felt that something should have been told to European, and even eventually I came to the point to say, no, this is not just for European, it's even for Canadian, it's even to inform this state multiculturalism or state post-nationalism that is hiding or is built upon layering several layers of acculturation on top of what it is, the real identity of this land, right?
Mm-hmm.
And especially if you consider that these layers of acculturation have been brought to Canada in a form of a polyethno-laborist style that has always been exploiting labor first through colonialism, then the industrial revolutions and capitalism. Then you had two world war that basically fostered the Canadian identity, and then you had this slow switch to multiculturalism first with Pierre Elliott Trudeau, and then eventually now his son is talking about post-nationalism in a full-blown neoliberal society, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to say all these things. After 7 years, that book is about that. It's a book of metaphors. It's a book of how a small place represent the small scale model upon which the Canadian archetype and the Canadian Confederation has been built. Because what happened there, it's been a pilot project for many strategies that have been implemented on a national level to create the confederation and create the Canadian archetype that is the one that is being sold abroad. We're a progressive country, we welcome everybody. So there's a writer, Vinash Jaffrey, that says, talks about diasporic migration in the sense of there's people that are leaving other countries because of economic crisis, war, and they come here as refugees, but they end up siding on the settler side, forgetting about the history of the land. Now, nobody has to leave. We all have to live here, but to recognize all these layers and create equity among all the layers, I mean, I think is super important and cannot be omitted or cannot be uh, shadowed by the multicultural glitters that get spread all over the world. I'm not saying that that's bad, but we need to keep in account that, right? History needs to be told in the proper way.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, unfortunately, history has a terrible habit of being retold by the victors. I think it's very important to discuss the uncomfortable parts of history to ensure that it isn't repeated. And I find that the culture and the climate is still a little too PC, and we need to talk about the difficult things. We need to look at the ugliness that is happening so that we can actually affect change. Not just talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's French philosopher Michel Foucault that he says that you know history is not linear; it's always made of different layers, and the ones that get selected uh, in a certain way tell you even the relationship between communication and power, right? So it's really important. Here this book is pulling out all these layers, it's putting them together in the under the clock of modernity, and that's basically what it's saying to people, especially to newcomers. Look, you're coming here, you're building up your life, that's pretty good, but this is what happened before. We need to keep that in account if we want to have, you know, uh, a true reconciliation that is going through self-determination, is going through certain things that they're pretty much due to the indigenous people living in what it is Canada now.
Well, something that I did notice in a few of the photographs that you did share with me, and I have only a handful to share because I want to encourage everyone to purchase your book to see, it in.
When it'll be out, when it'll be out.
Well, I love to promote everybody. I'm like, buy it now, you have to. But something that I did notice when I was looking at your photos is a juxtaposition and relationship to nature. This one really struck me with the moth and the no trespassing and the skeleton of the teepee. The figure of the gentleman in front of the teepee and the snow in front of an electric light. There is so much rich storytelling here that's not readily obvious, but very, very powerful because of those relationships. Tell me about those relationships.
I'm glad that you get it because that's the work of 7 years. So basically, they when I started photographing these, I was coming from a very deep photojournalistic background, which is what I do on a daily basis. Up until 2015, when I kind of hit a snag and I quit taking pictures, but I kept going to the island, and that's when I started fostering the relationship with the people and started working cooperatively with the constituency of this project, right? So that's when I decided that I had to make my imagery that had a double value, a journalistic one, but even a metaphorical one. I thought about metaphors because I wanted to increase, and you did it very well, the readability of the pictures. So you didn't stuck just, okay, the elder, all these kind of things. You notice the light, the TP, the moth, or the skeleton of the TP, the no trespassing sign. Those are all random referrals that I put in my images to tell the story that I want to tell. So some of these pictures have been made dozens of times, 15 times. None of this is staged. This is, everything is happening, but it's always been created. I need that picture. What's the best picture to convey that idea? So I was chasing that idea more than just through one pictures. Then I had a range of them, and I was like, which one is the best? So the one that had more random referrals. The idea is to make you able, like you did, to enunciate different accounts about each of the subject or subjects of my imagery, because I'm pursuing, in some cases, a linear narrative, but in some other cases, a non-linear one. So that's the idea, and I'm glad that you got it. I mean, it's really. I mean, I'm surprised that you picked those pictures and you made those connections, because it's probably uh, one of the first time that you understood exactly what I wanted to do. It, but I want people to pick whichever level is accessible to them. And then from that level, create the reaction within themselves. Am I pissed off by this? Am I going to do research? Am I going to go read something? Am I going to call this guy, tell him that he's an asshole, that he should be proud to be Canadian? In fact, I'm not, I'm Italian. And it's even something that, I feel I'm not gonna take the Canadian citizenship for the work that I do, and even because of all this, not because I don't. I mean, my daughter is Canadian, my wife is Canadian. It's just to be consistent with what I've been doing, which is not accusing anybody, but it's trying to recognize I'm a guest. I consider myself a guest of the Indigenous people here, right?
There is the metaphor. We're all guests. You know, I, the most powerful photo that I saw, it brought me to tears because I've always had a huge problem with what happened with the residential schools, and truth and reconciliation is so important. And what really struck me about this photograph is the idolization of children, the commodification of children, the stereotyping of the indigenous culture, and how it has been watered down to almost a caricature. And here's a doll which is so representative of innocence and childhood, and then you have the crucifix which is so representative of the church. And I was raised French Roman Catholic, so I, from a young age was kind of brought up with that indoctrination and that religious dogma. And I remember learning about residential schools when I was a little girl, and I didn't quite understand what was going on. But as I've grown up and learned more about it, the angrier I have become. And that photo, I'm so glad it's in black and white because it's so matter of fact. There's no politicizing of it. There's no coloring of it. It's just presenting the facts of the duality of it and the truth of it. And I think it's such a very powerful and important piece. And I had to make sure that we kind of focus on that separately, because truth and reconciliation is not going to happen overnight, but it has to happen, and it has to constantly be revisited. You know, what made you decide to put this photograph together?
Okay, I'll tell you where I shot those two pictures. So the doll, it's from a household in Wikwemikong First Nation. I went to this house of indigenous lady that they were praying bridge. So basically, we're talking about senior ladies, right? Elder. And I remember I went there and they offered me this dinner and everything was boiled, boiled potatoes, boiled meat. And I had the dinner and they were playing cards. And I noticed the doll and she had it in a shelf with the glass in front. So I shot the picture. And then the other picture, the crucifix, is a cemetery that is right in front of the Spanish residential school. So all the kids from the island were being brought back then to this, most of them, to the Spanish is a little town on the Trans Canada Highway. It's on the north shore of Lake Huron, so it's been literally in front of the island, but you got to go around, so through the bridge and the road to get there, and the Trans Canada Highway. So the very first time that I saw a residential school, I went to Spanish, took the pictures of the building. It's the one with the Canadian flag in there, and there's the snow. It's always in that series. And when I was leaving, I noticed this crucifix that was kind of raising from the cemetery, and it was a snowy day. It was hazy. So I shot the two pictures, and I never used these two pictures for so long. Only after I started thinking about the metaphors and these pairings, I noticed those pictures. So this is to tell you that even the readability of the pictures, it changes, and it changes for each person
Yeah.
according to the amount of experience, reading, engagement with people that you do on a daily basis, right? Now I am a photographer, so I have to do it. I'm not claiming that everybody has to do that,
Yeah.
but I'm hoping that somebody will pick one of the layers, right? So that doll, I didn't find it in a little girl house from Toronto, right? It
Right.
was in the reserve, right? Because it's even, we sell dolls, but the dolls, they always represent the same people. They're white, mostly white, blonde, blue-eyed, and blah blah blah, right?
Yeah.
So that one is even it was a doll of pride. So in that contest, to put these two things together, it tells even something that is important to say when we talk about indigenous community. There was a shift from what it was called Indianized Christianity and forceful one, which is the one at the residential school. So that one was like, here we come to the reserve. Every reserve needs to have a church and a farm, so you guys can feed the soul and the body, right?
Yeah.
At that point, we are your friends. We can send your kids to us. We teach them English or French, whichever things. So there was some kind of respect, right? So the arc was like, I'm going from that point to the point of John Alexander MacDonald. I'm promoting the residential schools because I need to get the Indian out of these people and save the man, right? So
Mhm.
I'm using the priest and I'm putting together two doctrines that have always been fighting over the leadership in North America. So the Protestant and the Catholic, I'm putting them together to do this task for me, and we create unity in the multicultural clock in Canada, right?
Yeah.
So that happened. Then we all know what happened with the residential school. Now that we're talking about truth and reconciliation, we make a step one, the Indianized Christianity. So let's put the church back in the res, and we can leave, because otherwise, a lot of elders from the reserve will complain because they've been raised Catholic, they've been raised Protestant, and some of them along with their own indigenous tradition. So it would be a trauma for them to take away the church, but at the same time, is even a sneaky trick to say, okay, let's keep going like we were before with the Indianized Christianity. You do your tradition, but you take this one as well, right? Under the clock of truth and reconciliation. No one will tell you these things. I had huge discussion even with indigenous people, because I grew up 200 meters away from St. Peter, and I know what's going on in there, right? I've seen everything about the church. And One friend of mine from Manitoulin, he told me, you know what? When you live in a reserve, you lack context. What the church did worldwide, it's way more than what the church did just to the indigenous people in Canada, which is
Mhm.
horrible. But the
Yeah.
church committed so many crimes across the world that you need to have that context to realize that at a certain point, if you want self-determinations, those guys they got to be out of the rest of the whatever thing it's belonging to indigenous people as of now. If you want to really give them self-determination, and owning the land again, right?
Well, you raise a very good point about that. I truthfully, I never considered that perhaps, some people did grow up with the church in their life and that there is some meaning in there to them, and that is a great and thought-provoking point for me to consider after this, because I really and truly always just thought the church is the bad guy, get them out, enough is enough. Blanket statement, black and white. And you're absolutely right, it's not black and white. It is very convoluted, and it's definitely going to be a very, I don't want to say difficult step forward, but there is so much more to consider than what we see.
Yeah, yeah, no. The idea is that we think about indigenous community as everybody is living in a certain way, whereas they want to mingle with modernism, they want to be just like anybody else. However, the idea is that when we talk about an indigenous community, you got people that are attached to the hereditary chiefs and these kind of things that are traditional. But you got even in reality people that are fine with the colonial nomenclature, maybe because they benefit from that, but yet they're there, so they're a voice. The same thing is happening with the residential school. You have people that have horrible memories, and the majority have horrible memories. But I found even people that say to me, oh, you know what? I learned English and I was able to work in the newborn country. There's
Mhm.
people that say that. So when you translate that just in the faith realm, you got a lot of elders that grew up with both things, the tradition, the indigenous tradition, and the church. So I even recognize that to take out a church violently and symbolically from a reserve would be a big trauma even for them. But at the same time, if you look at the other side, it can be, okay, back square one. Let's do again the thing of the Indianized Christianity that led us to the forceful one eventually. Maybe this time will not be happening, but as somebody that is looking at all the layers and
Mhm.
is trying to collaborate with these people on the same level, I don't want to be the guy that is there and I'm here, I'm the photographer. No, I'm working with the people, so I'm exchanging opinion. I mean, I'm fighting with the people. I picked so many fights with indigenous people, and we disagreed on so many things. But that's how I foster the relationship, understanding, and all these things that are important for the type of work that I create. To create, that same level is an exchange. I'm learning from you, you're learning from me. You understand where I'm from, and I'm putting myself, in a vulnerable position. Okay, I'm the European. I know that my people are the ones that created all this oppression. So I'm putting on the same level. What can we do together, right? How can we tell these things to people beyond the crisis narrative? Okay, the opioid crisis, people shooting heroin or stuff like that. I don't want to take those speeches. I mean, I can do that every day when I shoot for the newspapers. However, it's even no longer going on newspapers, right? So
Mhm.
I don't want to do that. I want to find a way to tell these things in a different way and create some kind of resurgence. And I'm the biggest enemy of the word, the decolonization, because it's a buzzword. No, here we got to talk about resurgence, right? What we need is indigenous resurgence and self-determination. That's what is important to me, and that's what I shared with a lot of people that are in my pictures. Because at the end of the day, I cannot speak for the whole island or all the indigenous people in Canada. I can only speak for the little constituency that belongs to my project, and with whom I created this theory in a way, or this this narrative, or this the structure of thinking that, or revealing what happened in the past, right?
Mhm. Absolutely. And I know I've spelled resurgence wrong, but resurgence and self-determination, I think, is two very powerful ideas. With your book, where do you want to see it go? What do you want to see happen with it?
I mean, now I gotta start finalizing and sending it to print. I gotta make the other little changes, put the pictures in, put a picture out,
Mhm.
and ideally, the first thing that I intend to do is to share it with the community, run it through the community, and develop the idea within the community. And then I will have to think how to disseminate the book and the function of the book, because this is another thing. I just don't want to do something that is like, okay, I'm the photographer, I'm so good, I did this, or I'm so bad, or whatever, right? It's not about that. It's trying to create value through what I've been doing for the past 7 years, not just for myself, what I've learned, but in a bilateral way, right? So it's giving back to the community, which I already started doing because I shot the story about the opioid crisis that is ravaging the island. And
Mhm.
again, I did it in a way that I was trying to highlight the people that are fighting on the front, that are helping people to get out, helping people fight stigma, helping people, heal. And this is something that is affecting all island. Mistakenly is only put on the indigenous community, but it's all the island, because if the indigenous community are experiencing intergenerational trauma, small communities are experiencing neoliberal trauma, which is the trauma of abandonment. Okay, I did everything possible here in terms of industrializations, I'm leaving, and now we do here a little retiring community or a new cottage country paradise. We do these kind of things, right? So there is a lot of that. So at the end of the day, there is this great zone of trauma that it's one side for indigenous people, the other side for the other people, in which the coexistence is even more marked. And sometimes there's even a fight that is fought together, like the opioid crisis. I've done the story for the local newspapers and I didn't get paid. I just did it because I wanted to do it for the community. And I like the idea to offer, support to the community, right? So this is a way, a resource. You're not alone. You can heal. There are the structures. There's the funding. We can do this. So why do I have to go around and take pictures of people shooting? I'll take pictures of people that are fighting, that are on the front line, right? So that's the idea. So it's always the idea about the book is always first the community, and then we do all the other things. Then sure, I will do maybe exhibitions or stuff like that, everything that it's revolving around publishing a book, but the first idea is always that one.
Absolutely. Well, everybody, I encourage you to go to giovannicapriotti.com. Um, what we have been speaking about tonight is under Kanata, Kanata, which please remind me again, Giovanni, you were telling me yesterday what the meaning of it is specifically.
Canada is a Iroquois word, and it's the way that the indigenous people were calling the first settlement, and most likely is the word from which Canada came from, originated. So Canada means settlement in Iroquois, and that's most likely why this country is called Canada. They just changed the lettering, and that's how the name Canada originated.
That makes the most sense, actually. Thank you for clarifying that. I knew, but I just couldn't quite remember or grab the words. But I'm really excited to see this book in print. Please keep me posted. I will happily promote it, and hopefully, I can attend any sort of ceremony that is happening, because this is a really important project that you are working on and essentially living. It is a living work, and I'm so honored that you would spend the time with us today to talk about it and share that with us. Thank you so much, Giovanni. You are just such a wonderful surprise when you walked through my front door to photograph us with our toys. I did not realize that you were um, so deep and so talented. I had
Thank
no
you.
idea.
Thank you, thank you, no, thank you for letting me speak about these things, because I think it's important. I mean, at any level, either a YouTube show or a radio, a podcast, all this. It's not just about promoting. It's just about having conversation. Yeah. The way that I want to do it, something that is important to me, is to be in conversation with people like this. Present the book. It's an ongoing conversation. It will be an ongoing conversation.
Absolutely. And I really look forward to it. I hope we can get together again and have a part 2 about this, because I think there is so much more that we can discuss and that we should discuss. And I really hope that you would come back and, share more with me.
Yeah. I mean, anytime. You let me know, and I'll come back and I'll tell you at which point I am with the book, or maybe I'll have it in my hands. I'll hand you a copy, and we'll go from there. But yeah, always happy to join your show and talk about these things, or even other stuff, since I'm working on so many things. So
Thank you so much, Giovanni. You might be my go-to stringer interview in the future. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
thank you for having me. Bye.
Take care. Be well.
Bye.
As always, I want to thank you guys so much for being an amazing audience. Very often I'll see comments pop up and I can't always show them because the conversation is just so focused, but I know that you're watching and I'm really grateful that you do. For those of you who don't get a chance to watch us live, we are archived on my YouTube channel, Planet Lizzdom. So please, if you haven't yet, subscribed and hit that bell for updates so we can let you know what's going on. But you can also check our show. It's syndicated on Carney Show on Twitch on Fridays at 8 p.m. Jeff with the G out of New York City is making some great content. His Devil's Hour show is one of my favorites, and I highly encourage you to check it out. And I also want to thank those of you who have become my patrons. If you go to patreon.com/Planet Lizzdom and pledge to support me every month, I have all kinds of benefits and tips and tricks and all kinds of other great prizes and thank yous coming up for the new year. I saw a new Patreon join tonight, so thank you so much to you. I really appreciate it. You're helping me to create a better show, and season 2 is going to be amazing. January 6th, 2022, I have a special guest lined up. He's one of my favorite Canadian celebrities, and I'm still going to keep it a secret for you because I really want you to join. We're going to have prizes, all kinds of giveaways, and all kinds of tomfoolery going on that night live. But in the meantime, I want to thank you all so much for joining me every week. It is such a big deal that you would be a guest with me. If you have any suggestions, tips, or tricks, please feel free to leave a comment or send me a personal message as well, because I am really making this show for you guys. So remember to always tune in, turn on, and take part, because truly you never know who's going to land right here on Planet Lizzdom. Have a great weekend, everybody. I'll see you next Thursday. Bye. Or not. Where's my video? There we go.